Gonna be relevant. We need to talk about this topic now, more than ever. I'm Regina Lux. You're watching Veritas on the Rocks, and welcome to my pretty little soapbox. What is heroic love? When we hear that term, we oftentimes think of someone laying down their life for someone else. We think of parents doing whatever they have to in order to protect their children. We think of soldiers running onto the battlefield in order to protect their country. We think of people who stand up together, standing shoulder to shoulder to defend something, risking violence or even jail time. We don't think of heroic love as something that we ought to demonstrate daily. But indeed, in order to be a good parent, spouse, or friend, we need to utilize heroic love. So what is heroic love? How is it different from other love? In some ways, it's easier to take these big, grand, heroic stands on things, and much more difficult to train ourselves to be heroic in small, daily tasks or personal relationships. How many of you have had a big fight with someone in your life, and you knew you were right, and they treated you so terribly? Do you recall how you reacted to them? Did you rail against them, give them a piece of your mind and a taste of their own medicine? Did you cut them out of your life completely? Did you justify these things because of their treatment towards you? Now, there's nothing wrong with putting up boundaries for yourself in order to keep yourself and your family safe, happy, and healthy. If someone is toxic, yes, put up boundaries and hold firm. If you're wondering what I mean by toxic, I have another video where I outline very toxic behavior. Go give that a watch after this. But what if in the situation the person wasn't toxic? You just simply had a disagreement. When I first thought of this term, heroic love, I first thought of it after a situation with a family member. They treated me poorly due to their own insecurity and lashed out at me because of something they thought I could have been hinting at. They overreacted, and they were in the wrong enough that I would have been within my right to toss them out of my house for such blatant disrespect towards me. But I didn't. We didn't talk for a while. I had no desire to. Then after a while, I reached out to her. I wrote to her, I could outline every reason I'm upset with you. Point out every action and word that you said that I found unjust. But that really wouldn't be putting you before me, would it? Whether or not I'm justified in how I think or feel, it still shouldn't matter more to me than you do. Saying what I'd like to in order to defend myself at your cost isn't exactly heroic, is it? I guess what I'm saying is that if it comes down to choosing between me or you, I'm choosing you because I love you more. I told her that in the end, it didn't matter who was right or wrong. What mattered is what we were to each other. I told her that in the end, if I only wanted to engage with people who agreed with me on everything, then that's not a very heroic kind of love. And we're called to love. And sometimes that means loving senselessly. Loving someone else even if they harm us. Because honestly, none of us are blameless of hurting other people. Truly loving means putting someone else before yourself, even if they don't deserve it. In my letter, I didn't tell her that I thought she was wrong and I was right. I didn't tell her that I needed an apology to move forward. I told her that I loved her, and if that's the case, I was putting her before myself. I needed to demonstrate heroic love. And I needed to humble myself in order to do it. If you love someone more than yourself, you need to be willing to be humble. You become what you think because you act upon your thoughts. If you believe you are a loving person but you don't demonstrate it, I have some news for you. You aren't as loving as you think. Now, does that mean letting your brain fall out and agreeing with other people because they're more emotional? No. It's okay to stand your ground in a disagreement. Don't let anyone push you around. But if you want to heal wounds and conflicts, then you need to love in a way you've never loved before. You need to love heroically. Love isn't a feeling. It's behavior. It's easy to love someone when they validate you. Much more difficult to look someone in the eye after they've spit on you and say, I love you anyway. To turn around and offer help to someone who had previously slapped your hand away, to stand up and defend someone even if they don't defend you simply because it's the right thing to do. Heroic love changes people. And it changes others because it first changes you. You become a light in the darkness that people are taken aback by. But first, it requires personal transformation. And as all good begins, it all begins with humility. Someone has bumper stickers you don't agree with, but you surprise them and pay for their meal in the drive-thru anyway. A neighbor keeps forgetting their trash can on the curb, even though you've expressed to them how that irritates you. But you take it back for them, week after week, without grumbling. A neighbor listens to music too loudly, so you go over there with a smile on your face to communicate it to them instead of turning up your music even louder. When you don't take revenge on someone for spreading lies about you, alienating people from you, and trying to ruin your reputation, you love them senselessly. And believe it or not, it's easier to be kinder to strangers than your own friends or family. What about when your kid is screaming in the middle of the night and you really, really don't want to get up to go handle it? What kind of heroic love do you need then? What if your spouse blows you off and hasn't been treating you as they ought to, and you grow bitter? What kind of heroic love do you need then? What about when your teenager expresses disrespect? What kind of heroic love do you need then? What about when your parents are getting on your last nerve? What kind of heroic love do you need then? What about when a friend turns out not to be a friend at all, and they actively harm you? What kind of heroic love do you need then? It'll take some time to change yourself into the light that's needed, and it'll take even more time to affect other people. But do it anyway. Do it because it's heroic, and we need more heroes. We have too many villains. Someone's got to fight them. At the risk of sounding cliche, you help teach the world how to love others by first loving them senselessly. People need to understand what it's like to feel love so they understand it and can give it to others by actually behaving lovingly, not just claiming you're a loving person. You need to truly empty yourself out, growing more and more humble. And then when you're in that space, you'll find you don't even have a desire to scream about your enemies. You will feel the worth of others and not a desire to tear them down based on anything they've done to you. You'll find peace and you'll find courage, true courage, very different from wrath. Courage to stand up, courage to be hated, courage to be misunderstood, courage to be for others what they need, courage to have heroic love. Laying down your life for someone else doesn't always mean that you have to physically die. Sometimes it means dying to yourself in order to show others how they should be living. By dying to yourself, humbling yourself, you show others how they can too humble themselves. Heroic love is something we should all be practicing in every instance of our lives. Our identities should be clothed in humility. We shouldn't have to wait for big, grand examples to be heroic. Heroic love doesn't need a grand example. It can be as simple as not gossiping, talking to someone else when they seem lonely, offering help when someone else needs some. It doesn't have to be grand examples, but these things are indeed heroic because they are self-sacrificing. Just ask yourself, are you patient? Are you kind? Are you envious, boastful, arrogant, or rude? Do you insist on your own way? Are you irritable or resentful? Do you rejoice in wrongdoing, even against your enemies? Are you happy when the truth comes out? Do you courageously bear difficulties? It's so easy to make excuses for our own poor behavior, saying, well, what they did made me act that way. No, we need to take responsibility for our own actions. Speaking for myself, if I've been shown true love, then I know what it is and how to give it to others. And there's very little excuse for me not to, especially when so few people have been shown it. When we say I love you, we ought to mean I love you more than myself. If we don't, then we don't truly love. And here's the kicker. We're supposed to love everybody. That means you're on the bottom of your own totem pole. What's a grand example of heroic love? one you can compare to your smaller daily tasks in your own life, your own heroic love. The following is a true story about heroic love for a complete stranger. Maximilian Kolbe was a Catholic priest who was rounded up by the Nazis during World War II, because yes, they were rounding up Catholics as well. He was sent to Auschwitz. One day, a man escaped, and in order to deter future escape attempts, the Nazis rounded up a bunch of random people in order to throw them into a pit to starve them to death as an example to the others. Father Kolbe was not chosen. Instead, another Catholic man was chosen, and he had a wife and children, and he was crying out to the Nazis for mercy, begging them not to kill him. So what did Father Kolbe do? He stepped forward, and with full realization that the Nazis could have refused him and shot him dead on the spot, he offered to take the man's place in the pit, with full knowledge of what would happen to him. After 9 days, everyone else had died of starvation, except for Father Kolbe. He just wouldn't die, and this mystified the Nazis. So they killed him by lethal injection of carbolic acid. 40 years later, the same man that Father Kolbe had saved was present at St. Maximilian Kolbe's canonization. There's a lot of evil in this world, so there needs to be even more courage. Virtue signaling is not courageous, it is the opposite. Act, but act out of love. Act in a way that reminds other people of their human dignity, even if you don't agree with them. Pointing fingers because you're in pain doesn't do that, because you're not acting in humility, aware of your own shortcomings and how you've harmed others. Are you angry at recent events? Then rise up with Veritas. Be an example of heroic love for others, and love so hard that it brings you to your knees.